Hey guys, it's Elizabeth from DogWool. Welcome to our very first How to Crochet video. Today we're going to be going over the crochet supplies, but if you're not interested in that, you can always skip ahead to our next video when we upload that. But for right now, we're going to start off by going over yarn and their weights and textures. So this here is a skein of lace weight yarn. And lace weight just means that it's thin, obviously. So this is a thinner yarn. And then another yarn you could use is medium weight, which is generally like your red heart yarns, your big twist. This is the most common yarn. You'll use it for things like hats and stuffed animals. I prefer red heart super saver or big twist yarn. Big twist is a little cheaper than red heart, I find, when you buy it from Joann's, and it gives you about 20 more yards per ball. And you can also have super bulky yarn, which I've got a skein here, which you can see a ball. And this is kind of like a knitted texture, which we'll go over textures in a second, but this is just like a very bulky yarn. You would use it for like chunky hats or chunky scarves, you know, mostly clothing accessories. You could also use it for stuffed animals if you want to use something with more of with larger stitches that would look bulkier. But really you can get any kind of yarn from, like you could get yarn that's thinner than this even, and yarn that's 10 times thicker than this, which is where you see those super bulky blankets that you'll see recently. And then we also want to talk about textures today about yarn, because different textures can give you different looks. So one of the balls I have in my collection is this kind of a satin yarn. It's multicolor. I'm not really sure what I'm going to use it for yet, but it's kind of like a little silky fabric kind of a thing, which is kind of weird. They got like these t-shirt yarns out now, and the kind of knitted textures like I showed you before. And these ones are great. But then you've also got ones like these that kind of have like sparkles and stuff, if you can see that. I'm not sure you can. Here, let's see. It's got kind of loops in the yarn. It's got some black thread and orange thread. It's got a bunch of loops and very much a halo. You can see here, like off of this strand, there's lots of little fuzzies coming off the side there, and that's called a halo, all these little fuzzies that are hanging off. And it makes it a very soft, like this is extremely soft yarn right here. Like, I think I've only felt a few balls that are softer than this skein right here. So for crocheting, you can use just about any kind of yarn you can think of. It just depends on your project if you want to make. This would be good for, say, like a soft scarf or like a baby hat or something. Something that you generally want to be particularly soft with. This would be good for more like a decorative item, like a flower on a hat, but I wouldn't use it for the project itself just because of its texture. If this was softer like this one, I would use it for scarves or something, because it would give it a really cool looking texture. But as far as most projects, you would want to use some kind of medium weight yarn, maybe not super fluffy, but somewhat soft, because a lot of projects require it to be soft. But I find that Red Heart Super Saver is perfect for stuffed animals and, you know, little details on just about anything. You can also use the softer stuff for stuffed animals, especially for like baby toys. And then lace weight is good for smaller projects. Like I was working on a dress a while ago that I don't think will be finished, but it had a very lacy texture to it. I was going to put some fabric underneath. And this is good for doing like the smaller details, for doing like tiny flowers. I did a baby blanket, which you can see on our Tumblr blog or on our Twitter page. We did a baby blanket a while ago for a friend of ours. It was gray and it had pink elephants, and all the elephants had tiny little gray bows. I used yarn from Knit Picks. I actually love their yarn. It's very nice. I had a gray skein that was same weight as this. It was lace weight, and I used it to make all those tiny bows on each and every one of those elephants. So aside from yarn, the next most important thing you'll need is crochet hooks. And I have this nice little bag here. You don't necessarily need a bag or anything, but a pouch keeps them organized. And crochet hooks are very important because that can determine how lacy your project is. So this bag's upside down. Here, let me flip that. I've got our smaller hooks on this end and our larger hooks on this end. Now, as you can see, you can get them in like a plastic form. You can get them in a metal form. You can get them with rubber on the ends. It really doesn't matter. I also have a wooden one right here. This one is actually for nooking, which is knitting with a crochet hook, which might take a while before you get there. But for right now, we're just going to talk about the different sizes of hooks and how you tell. Personally, I don't like to use the lettering. Like as you see on most hooks, it'll say something like this. This is a 6mm, but it also says J10. A lot of patterns will tell you both or just one of them. I prefer to use the 6mm because what we have happen is you'll have two hooks that are about the same size but really aren't. Let's see here. I had some earlier, I'm not sure really when. I think these might be it. Let's see. I'm not entirely sure. I did have one though. I had this 3.5 here. It won't show you, it doesn't want to focus. It's an E4 and it says 3.5, but I have another hook that is a 3.75 and it still says E4. So I don't like to go by the lettering. I prefer to go by what size millimeter it is. And this the size of your hook can affect how your project looks, because if you use a lacy weight yarn like this and you use a smaller crochet hook, like say this 3.125 right here, this will give you a more tight structure. Whereas if I were to crochet with this larger hook, the 6mm, you get a very lacy structure with your stitches, even if you're not using a lacy pattern. But it really doesn't matter if you use wooden, plastic, or metal. I just find that I like metal more because I feel like there's more strength behind it, especially with the smaller hooks, and I have actually snapped a couple crochet hooks before. So that does happen if you're like me and you crochet very, very tightly. So I prefer the metal hooks because plastic ones aren't as sturdy, and I'm scared to snap the wooden ones because they're so nice. But aside from that, other than obviously the yarn and the crochet hooks that you would need to crochet, you might also need to use things like stitch markers. Now these are very useful. They come in different shapes and sizes. This one is just a little circle loop. Oh, come here. Just a little circle. You slide it through whatever stitch you're working with, and that marks where the beginning of your round or your row might be. And you just slide it into the loop and it sits there, which I don't personally like these because I find that they might fall out more easily. But there's also these ones that look kind of like safety pins. You slide them through your stitch and you kind of lock them. These are my favorite. I get the medium sized, I believe. It might be large, I'm not sure. But I prefer these. I use these for a lot of my stuffed animals and stuff whenever I'm going in a circle. And then this right here is actually a pack of our DogWool stitch markers that we specifically printed ourselves. And these work kind of like the circular ones do. Right here. It's very tight right here, so it doesn't slide out as much as the circular ones, but you just slide it into the stitch, and then it's a cute little paw print shape for whatever project you're working on. And we are selling these on our website right now. We have 3 packs available. There's 24 or maybe 23. I'm not sure. But I believe there's 24 pieces in each. They come in, this is the smaller size. There's small, medium, and large, and they come with 23 pieces in total. So you can find that on our website, which we'll put in the description below. But aside from stitch markers, you'll probably also need yarn needles. Now these are just like sewing needles, except the eye on them is bigger. And these can also come in a plastic. You can't really see that because my camera's being fussy today. But they'll have a larger eye in them, so you can actually fit the yarn through. These also come in plastic, but I find that I prefer the metal ones because the yarn will make the needles bend if they're plastic because they're so flimsy. So the metal ones are sturdier, and it's easier if you want to put the yarn through a stitch and not just underneath it or something. But you will need to sew projects, like if you're doing blankets that have squares in them and you're sewing all the squares together, or if you work a hat in rows instead of rounds, you have to sew the edges together to make it be a hat shape. Those are probably the most important things. Of course, you'll also need a pair of scissors because you kind of have to cut the yarn. And measuring tape can be helpful for gauge, which is how many stitches there are in 4 inches. But I personally don't pay attention to gauge much. I just find that if you crochet, it's just a matter of crocheting the same way throughout a piece. So as long as you don't start off super loose and then crochet super tightly towards the end, it'll turn out pretty okay. It's just a matter for things like clothing, gauge matters, because if you're making a small shirt and crocheting loosely, it might become a large, which is a little problematic. But aside from, you know, the essential scissors and sewing needles and stuff, there's also pom-pom makers. Now these ones are, I believe these are boy, I'm not entirely sure. No, these are clover, sorry. These are clover pom-pom makers, and I love these ones. These are my absolute favorite. They got these that kind of fold out here, which is great. You kind of fold a side out and you wrap your yarn around on each side for whatever you're making. And then you cut down the middle here, and you'll wrap a yarn around, you know, cut off a piece of yarn, wrap it around, tie it, and that'll be your string for attaching it to whatever project, like if you're making a pom-pom rug. And then these pieces just come apart, and then your pom-pom just kind of falls out in the middle, which is really nice. It makes it super easy. This is a large one, and then this is a medium, and I do have one that's actually a little bit smaller than this. And I like to use these for our pom-pom animals. We have a lot of pom-pom birds that are based on real birds, and we've done hedgehogs before and several other ones, which you will hopefully soon be able to find on our website. But these are just the most basic supplies for crochet. You don't need pom-poms for everything, but I find that obviously crochet hooks, your general medium weight yarn, you can find Red Heart for about $3 at a Walmart if you would like. And then stitch markers if you plan on doing stuffed animals or anything like that. So these are probably the 3 most important items for crocheting, and in our next video we'll be going over the very basic stitches. So if you'd like to hop over there, when we get that uploaded, we'll see you then. Thanks for watching!